Alrighty. So my name is Rob Miller. I am the managing editor at the Columbia Basin Herald, and joining me on the video today is Ken Murray, superintendent for the Ephrata School District. And we wanted to sit down, Ken and I, and just kind of talk a little bit about the levy that's coming up. You've got February 11th is the levy election. I know, everybody should have their ballots by now, that kind of thing. But we're going to be covering the election all the way up until February 11th, and then on the 12th we should be able to have some results in the paper, at least tentative results, which are usually in our area a strong indicator of the end result there. We're looking at this. This is an EP&O levy. Can you tell us a little bit about what is an EP&O levy and why is it necessary from the school district's perspective to ask the voters for this funding?
Sure. So an EP&O levy, Rob, is the technical term for it. It's an educational programs and operations levy, and so it used to be called M&O levies, maintenance and operations levy, and really what it does is it funds so many of the things that we don't receive state or federal funding for, and so it's anywhere from funding traditional operational costs to funding some of your elective expenses to some of your staff trainings. It's essentially is what districts need to be able to stay whole. In the Ephrata School District, local voters actually approve about 4% of our revenue through an EP&O levy, and then we get levy equalization that is upwards of 6%. So it ends up being about 10% of our operations that are funded through these levies on an annual basis.
Okay, and when we're looking at that, it's a big part of the school experience for students. Your athletics are funded through EP&O. You've got your academic electives, like you mentioned, but also things like your Methlympians and different things like that their expenses for competitions are kind of covered, like getting a school bus to take you from point A to point B. Is that right?
Yeah. So Rob, I'm actually really glad you mentioned activities and athletics, because that's honestly what most people think of when they hear EP&O levy, and they are funded. Activities and athletics are funded through these EP&O levies. These EP&O levies in Ephrata, for example, we had 1,100 participants in athletics last year from Ephrata Middle School through Ephrata High School, and then we had about 600 participants in our elementary schools through our high school in activities, and so that's a lot of participants. When you talk about the trips, kind of a fun fact in Ephrata, our levy dollars last year funded 285 trips. We took our students around the earth almost 1.5 times on those trips, and so without levy dollars, our kids are staying here in Ephrata and not going around the earth 1.5 times. And
that's a lot of miles in the Evergreen State.
That's a lot of miles in the Evergreen State. And but beyond that, Rob, like I said, we mentioned our elective classes are also funded through it. We have a pretty large portion of our instructional technology, trying to make sure we're putting the right technology in front of kids, in front of staff, to kind of keep them on the cutting edge so they're prepared for tomorrow. A lot of that's funded through levy dollars. Our safety and security work here in Ephrata is funded in various ways, but one of the primary funding sources is our levy. We also do something in Ephrata called College in the High School,
right,
which is an opportunity for students to earn college credit without leaving our campus. We receive some state funding from it, but it's not full. And so to make sure that that program is fully funded, we use levy dollars. And then the biggest chunk, you may have heard some conversations around what are called MSOCs, and these are materials, supplies, and operating costs. We fund anything that is unfunded by the state of Washington in terms of our MSOCs, our materials, supplies, and operating costs, through our levy dollars. To give you an idea of what that means in Ephrata, 6 years ago, the unfunded amount, so again, the difference between what we receive from the state and what we have to generate locally, was about $800,000. Last year, that ballooned to $2.8 million. And so just huge dramatic increases in just what it takes to run a school district. And your material, supplies, and operating costs can be anything from your papers and pencils, or your paper and pencils that you need, to paying for your insurance, to paying for your utilities,
ink toner, all that.
Ink toner, all of those types of things, and so that is the one that is hitting every school district really, really heavy and really, really hard. So that probably gives you a little bit of an idea.
Yeah, and I've spoken with Carol Lewis over in Moses Lake. I've spoken with Andy Harlow down in Mattawa at the Wahluke School District, and they're saying the same thing. Like, inflation has hit school districts really hard. I mean, of course, we all feel that at home too. I mean, you go in, like, there's the price of eggs, which isn't just inflation; it's also bird flu. But you're also looking at inflation being a factor. Whether like a loaf of bread, like the inexpensive, store brand bread used to be like 99 cents to $1.10, and now it's nearly $2. So there's that, and of course, there was also like construction costs ballooned, and that's part of why y'all decided to take a step back and defease the bond to make sure that you didn't want to do a project that was only half done. I mean, the frame of a building doesn't do much good to educate kids, but you're trying to plan ahead and take responsible steps is one of the things that you've repeatedly told me over the last several months, as we've been working together. So one of the questions that we get, whenever we post anything about the levy, whether it's yours or Mattawa's or Moses Lake's or anywhere, is the folks that think that this is a new tax. My understanding is that this is kind of a renewal with a little bit of adjustment for current operating costs. Is that right?
Yeah. So the phrase that you typically use in schools is this is a replacement levy. So we currently in 2025 are wrapping up the previous 4-year levy that was approved in 2021. And so what voters are voting on February 11th is a new levy that will begin in 2026 and then be a 4-year levy, so 26, 27, 28, and 29. And so it replaces the existing levy. That levy will no longer be collected. This is a new replacement levy of that. We are, and I appreciate you bringing this up because it's absolutely something I want the community to know, we are asking for a bit of an increase in terms of the dollar amount that we're hopeful that our community will support. With that said, we're asking for that increase in dollar amount, and it's coinciding with not only our EP&O levy ending, but we also had a transportation levy that our community also had voted to approve in a previous year that is also expiring actually this year. So in 2025, there's actually a reduction in the expense of the local tax burden on our community because that transportation levy, which allowed us to purchase 4 buses and get our bus fleet in a good spot for depreciation, that's also going away. And that was about 24 cents, I think is what it was in 2024 per thousand. And so when you look at our lift is really pretty minimal from where it's been to where we're hopeful it'll be. Rob, one thing I do want to mention, because I think it's important for people to know this, in Ephrata, we're considered a property poor district. And what does that mean? It just, at the end of the day, it means we just don't have a lot of industrial property in Ephrata and in our area. And because of that, what we can ask our local voters for, we have to be really, really realistic, and we can't over ask. And so if you look at some comparative data in Grant County, we generate, and I'd already shared this, roughly 4% of our revenue through local taxation. The county average is about 6.5% generated through local revenue. One of our school districts generates about 14% of their local revenue through local taxation. We're at 4%. Statewide average is 12.5%. We generate 4% locally. And at the end of the day, what that really means is in Ephrata, we're trying to do everything we can without putting as much burden on our local community because we just know we just don't have that industrial infrastructure to lift that burden and to share that burden with higher property value owners, if that makes sense.
Nothing against Quincy, of course, but they do have those data centers over there which have a high property value, not just for the land itself, but for what's on there.
Absolutely.
That is some really expensive buildings and infrastructure that goes into keeping those running. And that means that you've got a higher value on the land, so it takes a lower percentage of taxation to reach your goals. You know, and then, you know, you've got like going up right by Grand Coulee Dam, the Coulee Dam School District up there. I've spoken with the superintendent up there a few times, and their problem up there is they've got a lot of national land, right in there.
Government land, right?
Yeah, it's you know, either, you know, the Fed or the state owns it, and in some cases there are exemptions for tribal lands and different things like that. And that means he has a very small taxable property base there, and so that's you know, adds to some complications in that area of Grant County. But here, you know, we're going along and we're looking, you're trying to manage debt and look at things and keep kind of a forward view is the impression you've given me. Now, with that, you know, you've also kind of talked about a little bit, you're planning on whether or not you need a bond to finish up the building projects and whatnot, and we'll be covering that, of course, as that comes forward. I'm not going to put you on the spot for that right now, but you know, that's something that folks should realize, is that, you know, you're trying to make sure that it all balances out.
Absolutely.
You're not overtaxing everything.
Right.
You know, pay off one car before you buy the next, that kind of deal. You know, and you and I both know that you know, there's a lot of things going on at the school that you, well, from kindergarten all the way up to, you know, a senior in high school, you've got a lot of things you're trying to provide. What are some of the specific things during the next 4 years that you're wanting to hit the mark on?
Well, again, if we're speaking specifically about the EP&O levy, Rob, it's really not about expanding our program, it's about maintaining our program. Again, when our local taxpayers have to pay, you know, when the burden is on the back of homeowners, it's really, really difficult to try to grow and expand in those ways. And so we're really looking for any other funding sources to try to grow who we are and what we are. Right. You know, one thing to mention, Rob, in regards to you know, this EP&O levy as well, and I think it ties to what I was saying, is again, going back to that property poor district, one of the really nice things locally is a voter approved levy allows us to access some state dollars. The state does recognize the difference between Ephrata and Quincy. Okay, Ephrata's assessed valuation, when you're looking at the entire county, is approximately 1/6 of Quincy's. Okay, and so to generate the same dollars as they can generate in Quincy, it costs our voters 6 times as much, which we just can't do. That's unreasonable. It's unreasonable to put that on the back of our homeowners, right? And so what do? We only ask for what we need. And so we look at our needs, we look at our budget, and we're asking for a dollar amount that really ties to that. But again, when we ask for what we need, then we do have the state that can actually kick in. And so we take those two numbers, we look at local taxation and what we get from the state and say, okay, what are our needs? Will those two numbers get us to what we need? And that's what we're asking voters for. And so again, it's not about expanding our programs, it's about maintaining our programs at this point. You know, and then in regards to where we go with what we might be able to do in terms of broadening what Ephrata is in the future, it really ties to whether or not funding is going to be available. You know, and as you know, there's some conversations around funding. Schools receive not only state funding and local funding, but they also receive some federal funding to do the work that they do. And you know, we may want to talk about that a little bit more, because you know, at this point right now, it's really hard to project beyond our current needs, because you just don't know what our funding sources are going to be long term.
Right. Well, and you know, that money that you're talking about coming from the state, that's the LEA local effort assistance. Correct. And it's basically taxes that we're already paying that the state then says, okay, you can have this back because you're supporting your schools the way that we want you to. It's kind of, you know, it can feel at least like they're saying, you vote to support local or you don't get your money back, you know.
Can certainly feel that way.
Yes, it can definitely feel that way. So, you know, but you've got the LEA, you've got your apportionment, you know, kind of in the U.S. as a whole, and even, you know, and even especially in Washington State, where, because I've covered in Texas and Montana and a few other states, you know, school funding is complicated. It's like you're using a Ouija board sometimes, I think, to try and get everything figured out. What are some other pots that you're trying to look at to make sure that you can supplement without hitting the taxpayers? How does it all come together?
Thank you for asking that question. So we certainly tie into the federal grant program, and that funds anywhere from Title I, Title II, all the way through Title IV. These are different programs that are out there and grants that are available to you that you apply for annually based on your needs, based on your population. They look at some census data, they look at some of your individual school data to really determine whether or not you're able to access those. But there's also specific programs and work that are tied to those grants. And so for us to be able to access those dollars, we actually have to make sure that we're doing specific works. I can tell you I'm positioned really, really well in regards to who we have in place to do that work. Sharon Selleck is our state and federal programs director, and so she works tirelessly to make sure that we're applying for those grants and accessing those things, which ends up being a decent portion of our funding. She not only does the state level grants, the federal level grants, but also our state grants that she works to attain. And so we're constantly working to try to find other ways that we can fund our work. One of the ones that is probably the most emerging type of area that I actually think we're doing very, very well in Ephrata is career and technical education. We've been expanding our career and technical education program really at the 7-12 level for the past probably nearly a decade now that we've really been growing that program, and they end up generating or accessing a lot of support. I can't remember what the exact dollar amount was, but just at our last board meeting, our CTE director was able to speak to a grant that they were able to attain that's allowing us to continue down a sports medicine pathway that we've started in the last couple of years. It's going to fund our fully certified athletic trainer and her work with some of our students as an example. So yeah, there's a lot out there, and we're not just waiting for funding to come our way. We're actively boots on the ground trying to find all of those funding sources to make sure that we're not just asking our local community to support our work.
Right. Well, and I know if you go around the school district, you'll see technology that you don't think about where it came from, where the money came from. But like you've got a Promethean board right over here across the way, right behind the camera, for our viewers. But like grant funding helped to get those.
Some of that, yeah.
Yeah, and you've got, of course, your laptops, technology, all that kind of thing. If you can get that, you'll do that. And then in a technology-driven world, it never hurts to have a little bit of frosting put on the financing cake when it comes to getting technology that students can learn to use and move forward. I know you've got multimedia programs in the high school, things like that. But that leads me to my final question, just kind of on a lighter note. There's the election coming up, that kind of thing. But there's always something going on at every school district that the Columbia Basin Herald covers, whether it's the Moses Lake folks. They just had some kids go off to a music competition and they did really well. I know you had a chess tournament here over the weekend. What are some other things that are going on at Ephrata School District that folks should know about, and just things that folks can be excited for?
No, I appreciate it. And Rob, before I do that, I do want to mention, and I really appreciate how you brought up LEA, and just that with voter approval, LEA becomes something that you can access and bring back to your community. It's something that all of us pay into. We're paying into it via various tax, and an approved levy allows us to bring some of that back to us, and so that's a real positive. But some things that we're really excited about, and Freda, thank you for bringing up the Waypoint Foundation chess tournament that happened this past weekend, and it's always been nice to support that group and to help them have a facility and help them communicate out and run just a great event for our community and our region. Some things to really be excited about in terms of the Ephrata School District. So we recently had 2 Lego robotics teams that went to state Lego robotics, did incredibly well. Matter of fact, they both have qualifying scores that may allow them to advance beyond the state competition. They're now in the running to potentially be at a national Lego competition,
Nice.
Which is just Just phenomenal. And we've been growing that program. That program was initially CTE supported and has kind of grown into a levy supported program, especially at our elementaries. So that was pretty cool. We sent 28 students to a FBLA event in East Wenatchee this past weekend. And of our 28 kids, we have 28 qualifiers for the regional FBLA competition. So
Nice.
all 28 of the kids have qualified for the next level of competition.
Right.
Which
And
is
that's Future Business Leaders of America,
correct,
right?
correct. Yeah, just super exciting. I know the advisors are just ecstatic. I reached out to the advisor and I said, great job. You guys did an amazing job. And they said, you know what? The kids did an amazing job. We just put them in a position to allow them to be successful, and it's the work of the kids. And it's such an example of the kids of Ephrata. When you put them in an environment to be successful, they find a way to be successful. And not always is success defined by wins and losses. It's about growth, it's about improvement, it's about learning. And so this FBLA example is an example, by the way, at 14 champions. So 14 different events that turned into championship events. I do want to share a recent grad. We have a recent grad who graduated last year and is at Gonzaga University this year. He went to Gonzaga on a scholarship to run for Gonzaga. And this past weekend was the first time he had an opportunity to actually wear the Gonzaga uniform. He was redshirting this fall. And so he had to kind of run as an independent. But first time he put the Gonzaga University uniform on and go out there and run, he had an opportunity to show what he's made of. And he actually won the 2025 Inland Northwest Invitational 1 mile in a freshman record time. So his name is Hayden Roberts. And what a great kid. He was a phenomenal student, phenomenal example of what it means to be a Tiger. And he's representing us incredibly well for the Zags now. Super, super cool. So those are some examples of some cool stuff that's going on.
I remember we were writing about him last year and whatnot. I think we even did a story when he signed and all that. So I'm glad that's working out for him. And then in addition to that, I know I live right across the street from Parkway Elementary, and I just I get a chance to see the staff out there, especially the PE teacher and the folks that are supervising the recess and whatnot. Those kids are out there yelling and laughing and having fun on a regular basis, and it's always good to see that. Especially when we actually have had a few sunny days over the last few weeks.
Maybe a little cold, but sunny.
Yeah, well, I don't mind the cold so much. You can move around to stay warm, but when it just gets gloomy, we want to move on from there. But I just want to thank you for sitting down with me today to talk about the levy and what's going on in Ephrata schools, and then if folks, just a reminder, and I'm trying to put this out as much as I can. You got to make sure that you have that ballot either in a ballot drop box or postmarked February 11th.
Correct.
And that means that if you're going to mail in your ballot, do not take it to the post office on February 11th, because what's going to happen is it's going to go from that post office over to Wenatchee, and then it's going to go from Wenatchee over to Spokane, where it will get postmarked on the 12th or 13th. So your vote would not be counted at that point. If you were voting last minute, I would say anytime after the 7th, make sure that you just go to the ballot drop box. If you go to the county courthouse, there's a drive-through drop box right there. It's super easy. I dropped mine off last weekend, and easy peasy stuff, and there's only one thing on the Ephrata ballot this time around, so it's not a lot to research and whatnot, not like back in November. That was some hefty reading and reporting that we did at the paper. So folks, thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves out there, stay warm, and if you see a kid out there in the community doing good, don't be afraid to tell them so.
Well, and one thing I want to share, and I appreciate what Rob just shared, and I'm sorry to maybe steal your closing here, Rob, but all I can ask is this: voters, go out and be informed, and go out and vote. And a great way to be informed in terms of our EP&O levy is to go to tigersvote.org. you go to tigersvote.org, there's a great opportunity for you to gather information so that you're an informed voter. There's also a way for you to be able to ask us questions directly. There's actually a menu right in there where you can reach out to us directly, and we can seek to provide you exactly what you need so that you can be an informed voter. Again, I think it's part of our civic duty to vote, and I think it's part of our civic duty to be informed when we vote. So please do what you can. Go to tigersvote.org and be an informed voter. And like Rob said, make sure you either get in that ballot box or get it postmarked by February 11th so your vote will count. Thank you, Rob.
No problem. And with that, we will let you all get back to your day, but y'all take care of yourselves, and thank you again for tuning in.
All right, thanks. I had to have that in there, Rob.